Welcome everyone to another episode of Nighthawks, and here I am with my friend Sadie, and we are going to be talking about some very interesting and out of this world sort of facts today.
I mean, we're continuing a theme.
Yeah, we are continuing a theme, and before we dive into this episode though, we want to make kind of a note regarding the last episode. The last episode was about thought photography or thoughtography, and Ted Serios, who did a lot of an amazing work. You know, you can check out his work. The links will be in the description and also show notes. And the last podcast, that's right. And in that podcast, we were kind of just dwelling with the idea of how did he make that, and Polaroid film and yada yada yada. But I just wanted to keep it short and simple. I kind of, I became a bit obsessed with it.
She went down a rabbit hole.
I went down a rabbit hole, and I actually found out the account of someone who had attended an evening where Ted Serios was doing one of his kind of performances, let's put it this way.
Breakdowns.
And he basically described, this will probably be on the show notes for those of you that have been able to download it. He describes in detail how it went. And then there's a part of it, his account where he says that during all that movement that Ted Serios was doing, and he was heavily inebriated and etc., he kind of saw something shiny in the end of the gizmo, which is obviously the bit where it would kind of be closer to his hand and head. Now, that person sort of this kind of came around and thinks, and a lot of people that have backed this, that they think that he was using some type of like projection, sort of like a little like film frame or something like that, that he basically was changing as he went along because he moved a lot. Hopefully we'll be able to put on that episode, or we have been able at this point to put some footage there where you can see that he's moving a lot. And I think it was what we were saying was partially right, sleight of hand, and then like maybe he would change like the either film frame or whatever he was using that he was putting at the end of the gizmo.
Trickery.
Which explains this to say that we wanted just to make a note about like this because we felt it was important to give more context as to what potentially Ted Serios was doing. Now, Ted Serios, the reason why I'm talking about him as well, and it's kind of great that we had to do this little introductory note, because it was through him that I was able to find today's subject, because I was doing some research and I watched this video, which was an interview of someone that had worked with him, and I referred this in the last episode. In that video, they said something about a woman named Stella Lansing. And I wasn't really sure what they were talking about, but he spoke kind of to me. And I decided to do some research, and I said, hey, Sadie, I think this is great for an episode. So we are here today to talk about the life and work, shall we put it this way? Of Stella Lansing.
Weird experiences of Stella Lansing. So, to introduce you to Stella, very little is available about her early life. I kind of tried to go down a rabbit hole, but, couldn't find anything. The only info I could get was that she was a middle-aged housewife from Massachusetts, and where her story starts is actually 1961. In around this time, 1961, she started to experience really strange, inexplicable, and sometimes scary occurrences. And with the ever-increasing frequency of these encounters of the third kind, hint to what it's about, Stella started to document them on film and photograph. And this would be over a 30-year period where she acquired this photographic and video evidence of what she saw. So again, it was in 1961, Stella noticed a bright orb hovering outside her Northampton, Massachusetts home. And at first it was kind of hovering in the distance, and she was kind of like, what is this bright light? She couldn't she couldn't figure out what it was, but very quickly it started zooming towards her, and it kind of stopped midair between her house and a neighbour's garage. And there was something about this object that it kind of gave her the vibe that it was watching her, observing her.
Yeah.
And that was kind of, before it shot away, she felt, that it was something kind of, it was recording what she was doing. And thus her journey began. But it would be another few years, I think, before she encountered something else.
That's right. I mean, in my research as well, because we do this in separate research because I think it's good for us to debate that here on the podcast. What do we think of these examples? What do we think of photography in these terms and stuff like that, and art in general? And anyways, in my research, I found that. And then I found one particular incident where she parked her vehicle in front of this lake that was kind of nearby her house. And this was the first time, because she had only seen like these sort of lights shooting away, like during the great blackout of, I think, the East, or I can't remember what it was, but it was a great blackout in 1960s and 1965. She had seen it again she was basically driving to a friend's place, and she had seen these lights, and she had seen these black cars, and kind of a black car with no headlights on. So it's just sort of a weirdness, but she had never really seen anything as in like possible people, right?
Yeah.
Or figures.
Yeah, I mean, lights can be explained away.
Exactly. And so in this particular instance that I'm talking about, so she parked her car
This one is really weird.
in front of the lake, and it just sounds like such a movie scene, because basically the way she describes that it happened was that she parked the car and she was about to turn her headlights off when she saw something in the lake that was kind of tilting its head. It's kind of weird. Like, what is an alien bobbing head or sort of like that?
Hello.
And yeah, exactly. It's like, hello. And basically, she was really scared. Obviously, you'd be really scared if you saw something like that, whether it was real or not, or something maybe from your mind.
And grotesque sort of humanoid figure that was emerging from this lake.
I know, it's crazy. Like, it sounds like a lot of movies that I've seen, like a lot of those like 50s kind of horror.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Those really B movies.
The Black Lagoon creature or something like that. I remember seeing that, and it was around this time, so 60s, 50s, 60s. There was like a lot of horror kind of movies like that. But anyways, she basically sees it. She gets scared. She tries to drive away, and she realizes that it's coming towards her. But this time is when something changes, because all the occurrences before, she had never really shared with anyone else except her family and very, very close friends. And she had been kind of the sort of only witness, or there had been a lot of other people, but not really sure of what they've seen. But here, her family and neighbors see it as well. So it's kind of like they start to think or to believe that there's something surrounding her.
Yeah.
Right? As in, like, she's able, or there's an interest.
Yeah,
in
like
her.
neighbor Stella isn't just a crazy alcoholic that's seeing things, and we just
Was
have
she
to.
alcoholic though?
No, I'm just saying that's probably what they thought.
Ah, okay, yeah. Well, yeah. I mean,
was the Quaalude era, so maybe they thought she was on some of that.
I don't know. I kind of, when I looked at her example and I saw videos of her, she seems like kind of a sweet lady to me.
Oh, I know, they're the ones you have to watch out for. That.
Yeah. Well, but so yeah, this to me is I think it marks a turning point, because after this she decides she has a few encounters, I'd call it this way, all around the 1960s, 1965, 1967. And it was from this moment on that she decided to kind of try and record it. And so after this, I think there's an episode where she's driving again somewhere.
Yeah. So after seeing the creature from the depths, she bought an 8mm camera. And this is going to be important later, because you might know or might not know that those early 8mm cameras, they don't record sound. It's purely just video, or picture, I should say.
Yeah.
And she was hoping to capture some evidence of what she had been experiencing for a couple of years, so she could not necessarily just prove that it was real, but also kind of to analyze it and maybe to figure out what was going on and why she was attracting this sort of weirdness. And it's then she actually ended up catching some evidence on Route 32. Route 32.
Oh, okay.
So it would be a while before she was able to kind of go through all this. And then a few years later, now bear in mind, she's already caught what she feels is evidence, but she hasn't been able to analyse it in detail. And then a couple of years after that, in 1968, she bought a Bell and Howell projector. And that enabled her to slow down the footage she had got frame by frame. And then it was in these images. Now, this is quite freaky. It contained heads and torsos of strange men, and in what Stella had believed to be a craft of some sort. And it was in one of the images of the orbs on Route 32 from February 1967 that she was able to see, when she slowed down, these sort of weird, creepy looking humanoid kind of figures. Later, she would say, I quote, "I never saw the people when filming it. I can't tell you what object they came out of or what they were in." And these creatures would become known as the occupants.
Ooh, I like that because it's not very telling of...
Yeah, it makes it creepier, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I feel like, it's kind of like, movies that say The Lodger or something like that. It doesn't give away a proper identity or nature of said occupancy.
Which also makes it a bit more ominous because there's no explanation. Like, what are you occupying?
Yeah, that's right. And also I wanted to say though that when I was reading about her, I think one of the most impressive things to me that at least spoke to me was that she kept very detailed records of everything.
Yeah.
Exact dates, exact places, exact, very detailed descriptions. And also she, probably because she was aware that, her story was so crazy in a way, or crazy sounding, that she decided to use different cameras as well, different types of film. So I think that as well throws in itself an intent of like someone who's trying to make a conscious effort into, proving something and into capturing something. I don't know, but it seems to me like, there's a lot of examples that we've talked about here where they use the same camera, like Ted Serios or similar type of cameras,
him with his
Uri
gizmo.
Geller and etc. And even Mumler. And I think here there's an effort into going to a different route and into like having different sources of information to capture it and to prove it. And I think that's a positive point that I see in this story because at least, even if it's not real, at least she's trying.
Well, I suppose there's credibility.
We'll go there. We'll give our accounts or our opinions as to what we think of this story later on. Shall we?
Yeah, I think so, because it is quite a cool story. But I suppose we could move on. Now, obviously, as Tatcha said, she was gathering evidence. She was documenting everything that she was seeing and experiencing. But there wasn't like a big, I suppose, interest in what she had found until Stella decided that she would go to a UFO conference, and she shared her story with Dr. and I've never heard this first name until I read it, Berthold, Eric Schwarz.
Like Bertolt Brecht.
Ah.
Kind of the same.
It's weird when you see things written down and then like...
And how they sound and how they... Yeah, that's right.
But let's just say, just for convenience, Dr. Schwarz, who was fascinated about everything to do with UFOs and close encounters of the third kind.
And again, we're talking about someone who's a doctor. He's a psychiatrist, and again, it's similar here to the story that we talked about last episode, because also someone again that had a doctor kind of backing them or kind of like interested in their story. So these people are, not necessarily, they're very knowledgeable of what they're talking about. They're very educated, incredible, exactly, which adds more credibility therefore to the story or the people's events.
And I think one of the things for Dr. Schwarz that kind of that helped Stella stand out for other people who'd experienced the paranormal or ufology or anything like that was the fact that she'd consistently gathered this information. She wasn't just someone that had this one abduction story or this one encounter story. You know, she'd been going on for years making sure she'd capture this. The stories were the same, they hadn't changed. And what's interesting is to kind of, I suppose, add even more credibility. Schwarz performed medical and physical and neurological exams on Stella, and they all came back fine, normal and healthy. But also he learned, you know, that years of experiencing these really weird, sometimes scary phenomena had left her, I suppose they affected her mental health in a negative way. And she even entered a psychiatric hospital for an evaluation. And apparently, you can tell me if you came across this, but it was determined by at least one doctor that she was suffering with paranoid schizophrenia.
Yeah, that's right. But one interesting account, though, is that she was diagnosed by only one doctor in that mental hospital, I believe, with that condition. However, there's different accounts here. So I've found out sources that said that she stayed for 5 days initially, then she left, then she came back again for 5 weeks, I think. There's other sources that said she went back for 10 days and she was released and then she committed. But in all, she actually decided herself to go. She was not like forced to go, so she took on, you know, because she felt like everything was taking a toll on her mentally and emotionally, which is, I think I have to give her some credit there, because not a lot, I mean, I've never heard of other examples that we have talked here of people, they've always kept with their story, etc., and they haven't really had the acknowledgement or the accountability to say, maybe, hold on, this is kind of, you know, affecting me as well. But one important thing that I found at around this time is that Dr. Schwarz was with her, and he was with her through all this journey. But unlike the other doctor, he believed that he believed that all these years of being exposed to that is what gave her temporarily some type of paranoia and schizophrenia.
It was the cause and not the symptom.
Exactly. Sorry for interrupting the episode here, people, but it's time to listen to a word from our sponsor, MPB. MPB is one of the largest platforms where you can buy, sell, or trade your used photography and videography equipment. And during this month of March, we teamed up with MPB to offer you guys an exclusive discount that you can use whenever you're selling something to MPB. Now, if you head on to mpb.com and you're trying to sell something, you can put down the code Nighthawks, which will give you a 5% boost on top of the value of whatever you're selling. And this is, of course, valid for first-time customers only, and also on transactions above £100. And this is, of course, valid in MPB US, MPB UK, and MPB EU. So across all MPB platforms. So whatever you're trying to do this month of March or going forward, whether that is, you know, capturing ghosts, hovering aliens, or perhaps, you know, trying to capture some time travel, whatever you're doing, you can definitely get some equipment from MPB to help you in your ventures. And we'd like to thank MPB for kindly sponsoring today's episode and for sponsoring this season of the podcast. We really appreciate it. Links to them are down below. And now let's carry on with the episode. One thing is certain is that after she kind of left the hospital, she was very coherent and she maintained like her sanity from what I could gather. What did you gather on that?
I think, well, for Dr. Schwarz, and, you know, you have to, I suppose, when you're looking at doctors, go, well, what are they trying to prove from their end as well? How are they invested in this? And if people, I mean, I don't want to go down the conspiracy road just yet, but you never know. That other doctor, he could have been working for, I don't know, Area 51, and they were paying him to say, this woman is insane. It's like that bit in The Simpsons.
Kind of discredit.
Yeah, there's a bit in The Simpsons where Lisa, Bart plays a trick on Lisa, where he rings and says that she'd seen a UFO, and then these guys in black show up and go, we got a report that Lisa Simpson saw a UFO, and she's like, I didn't see any UFO, and then he's like, that's right, ma'am, you didn't. And then he kind of nods to a doctor who puts an injection away.
Oh my God.
So it's like that kind of it is that kind of thing.
Yeah,
So for
be.
him, that kind of added, for Schwarz, that added more credibility to her story. The fact that, you know, she was willing to go and have the psychiatric evaluation.
I agree.
And he did feel that obviously that this paranoia that she was suffering with was in fact caused by the mental turmoil she was experiencing after all these sometimes horrible, otherworldly visits. That, I mean, if I was seeing things, I suppose as humans, if you're seeing things that scare the bejesus out of you for a long time, you're not sure what their intention is.
Yeah, absolutely.
People are kind of believing you, but some aren't believing you. And, you know, you would feel... You know, it's kind of like gaslight. You would feel like you're going mad.
A mental breakdown or something like that, because I think it's quite a lot, regardless of, like I said, what you believe and what you believe at home or wherever you're watching this. I think it's super important to have that in consideration as well, that at least she had, I don't know, the initiative.
She definitely had integrity.
I think she had some integrity. Yeah, I agree.
A strong woman, which, you know, I know there's that kind of stereotype of the, you know, housewife that's come out of the boomer 1950s era is submissive and whatever, but she seemed kind of stoic, but also you know, sure of herself and sure of her point of view. And I think probably Schwarz saw those qualities in her, and then, you know, after he felt that she wasn't kind of having anyone on, she wasn't trying to make money from these crazy stories, but he decided, just for that extra bit of proof, that he would go and try and experience something with her. So it was on the 15th of April 1971, Schwarz, Lansing and another woman who has remained anonymous decided to go to the same spot where a lot of these sightings had occurred, and it was late at night, and they brought the car to a spot. They killed the headlights, and it was complete. They were plunged into complete darkness. And then a few moments later, these glowing yellowish orbs started to appear above them. And it was just as Stella had said they would appear. She'd been 100% convinced, and now it was happening. They stood kind of just as witnesses to what was happening in front of them. It was some kind of craft, but also then another black car, which I suppose similar to the one with the occupants in it, was approaching them, and it stopped quite near them before immediately turning on the headlights in their direction. So it was almost exactly like what she had experienced before. And when she had taken the pictures with the black car, the orbs. This is the account of what Schwarz experienced while out to investigate with Miss Lansing. While Mrs. Lansing and I were filming these strange lights, an automobile suddenly seemed to appear out of nowhere. It stopped approximately 100 to 200 feet ahead of our car. We were shocked to see its headlights illuminate our dark area and flicker alternately left and right in a manner reminiscent of semaphore signals. At the height of the excitement, the lady friend panicked and screamed to us to get back into the car, which we did. Fortunately, I photographed most of this bizarre incident for several film frames. The flaming disc can be seen gliding in the background, above and just over the glaring headlights. The mystery car suddenly turned up its lights and started its engine and barreled past us at great speed. Because of the blinding headlights, we could not make out the license plate, but the auto seemed to be rather large, nondescript, a General Motors model of several years ago. Do 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 do.
Play on the tune of X-Files.
Do 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 do.
Yeah, so the whole thing is pretty weird. And when we look at her photos as well, it's just, there's something about it. I can't really pinpoint, but there's a lot of photos that have this sort of clock kind of shape, and that sometimes goes like beyond the frame. And it's very strange because obviously this case has been taken on by experts and etc. And they said that this could be probably light leaks and etc., or something faulty with the camera, or something that had been tampered with in the camera. But then they couldn't really explain all the other like multiple evidence from multiple cameras and etc. etc. So to me this is very interesting, and reading that account by Dr. Schwarz, it's just very strange. The whole thing is very strange, and I think after that is when he was like, no, this is real, like, and he also debunked or basically refused to believe in any claims of other experts that basically said that this could be sort of a mass hallucination or a mass sort of
Hysteria?
kind of hysteria moment, which we know to be sort of a justification for certain phenomena that has been seen by in certain occasions or events by multiple people or multiple witnesses. So I think in here,
Salem witch trials.
Yeah, but I think in here it's just a weird one for me, because like there's all these movies as well, which I haven't been able to find many of them online, which I would love to. But from what I found, it's kind of hard to make it as well, because the examples that we have on YouTube as well, they're very, very bad quality. But it's rather strange.
Yeah. It is.
And eerie.
It is eerie. Now, of course, I mean, when you compare the kind of, I suppose, technology as well in the 70s that we have and to the technology we have now, I mean, things now can be manipulated a lot easier than they could be back then. So I suppose for me, that would add credibility, unless you had about 50 different people working on this ginormous hoax. It's not impossible, but like, you know, it's not like nowadays where you can manipulate an image or video with ease, just to say that there's, you know, to try and prove a point.
And also like 50s and 60s, which is to me not, I mean, I know that there had been occurrences in obviously other countries, and during the 70s and 80s and in the 90s with the X-Files and sightings and etc. There were loads of TV shows around this subject, so there was loads of people quote unquote being abducted and seeing things. But I think there's a thing about the accounts of 40s, 50s and 60s that makes it kind of like what I like to call, at least for myself, the golden years of UFO sighting. I think this is all connected because there were a lot of events as well that we can't forget, and we have to put this all in perspective. World War II, there were a lot of like classified aircraft that has been uncovered since then, obviously, that belonged to the US and other countries that were doing flights, whether there was maiden flights or test flights for something. And I think this is super important to have in consideration as well, especially with World War II. We're talking about, the Cold War, where is a time of mass paranoia, hysteria, secret agents, all sorts of things. So I think it fits well, and I think there's also a very historical and cultural background where this all fits
100%.
in my eyes.
Yeah.
And this is not to discredit what we've seen so far and what we've heard so far, but I think it's super important to do that. And also you have in the 50s and 60s, you have like various TV shows and movies that talk about like UFOs, such as The Twilight Zone. I don't know if you've ever seen it. I've seen a few episodes. It's just a whole combination of, like I said, cultural and historical things that I think makes this a golden era for these type of things.
Yeah, and then of course you're going into the Vietnam War, which also adds to this kind of civil unrest that's happening in America at the time. So, you know, there's so much going on, civil rights movement, everything. So I think all that adds to a certain, you're kind of like a scared rabbit watching what's
I think it's a general feeling of unrest.
Yeah.
Unrest and like I said, paranoia.
But so I suppose just continuing on with Stella's journey, it was kind of, she was continued to have these experiences, and then in 1991, I mean, we're talking 30 years now of these strange occurrences, that a television show, Sightings, discovered Lansing and her story, and this is why I said earlier that it was important to remember that her first recording was on an 8mm camera, which of course doesn't have the ability to record sound. So Sightings, this TV show, which obviously explored supernatural, etc., got hold of the original 8mm video that Stella had recorded, and they decided to transfer it to the VHS tapes, obviously for the purpose of their TV show. This is where it gets really kind of creepy. They played it back, and out of nowhere there was a strange, mysterious voices that were audible over part of the film. This shocked everyone involved. It even shocked Stella, because she she hadn't obviously
No
heard
idea,
it before.
yeah.
So this just added to the sort of strange phenomena that she was experiencing, and I suppose another layer of credibility, you might say.
Yeah, I mean, I think we are now at the part of the pod here where we can talk about our opinions, as in like, what do we think is really happening here? What do we think of these photos? I mean, I've seen loads of photos, and also for this episode, I was just doing just kind of random research, and I came across a lot of photos that you could easily say, okay, look, could be light leaks, they could be like someone projecting something, and or some type of aircraft flying. We don't know. But when I say an aircraft, I mean like an actual human, like aircraft, like human made. I'm not talking about kind of a flying saucer.
Yeah.
But I also think as well, and this is why I think I made a point about the 50s and the 60s and all the background, because I think there must have been a lot of technology that they were trying to develop back then in terms of supersonic flights and etc.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's in the same way that some technologies just don't take off because soon after something better comes along. Like the mini disc. Did you ever hear that?
No.
Exactly. It was like just before, I think it was before the iPod, and it was after the Discman. So it was in between. It was like a tiny little disc.
Discman, that thing that...
Yeah, CD player where you
CD,
get a portable. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
And then, you know, a lot of people think, oh, between that and then you've got the iPod. But there was a mini disc. I know one person that had one. And I'm not even sure.
What is a mini disc?
It was almost, I think it was
I sound so ignorant. But I think I'm telling my age now.
Yeah, well, I think I'm definitely revealing mine. Big clue there. I think it was square. But obviously it was a square container and you'd put it into something almost shaped like an iPod MP3 player.
Okay, gotcha.
And then I'm not sure. I think you had to burn onto them. I'm not 100% sure.
Gotcha.
Maybe someone can like clarify or we can look it up on Google after. But I do remember there's a couple of people that had one. I knew one person personally. And then within like about 6 months of someone that I knew having one, we all started getting MP3 players and iPods.
Yeah, that I remember, MP3 players and back in the day and iPods. But yeah, so what do you think of Stella Lansing's story?
Listen, I suppose for me, I am too quite fascinated in what else is out there. Yeah. Because it does actually kind of wreck your brain when you think of that we are just, you know, one small speck in a massive universe. We don't know 100% what's out there.
Yeah, why would we be?
I mean, look, I think it's a very small-minded, ignorant person who thinks that we're the only intelligent, and I use that word loosely, intelligent beings in the universe. I mean, come on, there's so much out there that most of which is undiscovered. We probably only discovered a speck of it. I also think, though,
there's a misconception here because a lot of people think that perhaps aliens and etc. would be all this like very futuristic kind of civilization. They might not be. It might just be like some type of life that exists out there.
Yeah, it could be just like a blob of something that just grows on a rock.
Yeah, exactly. So for me, it's like, you know, it doesn't have to necessarily, when we talk about an alien, it doesn't have to necessarily be the little green man or gray man that kind of come from a flying saucer. I mean, it can be like something like, you know, and sometimes when we're referring to life on another planet, it can be just a plant or something. And we can believe in that and not necessarily believe, like I said, a little green man. And I think like in this perspective, I'd like to talk about like photography a bit, and I think this is a very important again aspect of where photography has indeed served from a historical perspective. And I think not just from obviously proof and to what you're saying or not, it depends on what people believe. I think it's a case as well of what you'll see what you want to see. And I think with UFOs you'll see what you want to see. If you want to believe, if you want to see, and it's kind of like magical thinking, kind of like you seeing things like that you think they're that, but it really they might not be.
I heard before that psychologically humans, when we see something, we're looking for something that resembles a face. Often if we just see a mashed up image or something, we're
looking at the clouds, like the clouds.
We're programmed to see something that makes sense to us. Look, I definitely believe that there is probably something out there. Have they been here? I'd be mortified if they have been, because the state of the earth right now.
And do you believe Stella?
I think it is possible that there is a hoax going on there. However, it would need more than just Stella to prove it, because at the end of the day, I mean, she would have to be quite disturbed to go on for 30 years with this fairy tale, if that's what it is. But, you know, her documents, they aren't necessarily proof to me. And if someone wants to believe something like with Dr. Schwarz, and I'm not saying that this is what happened in any way, but you will take something that kind of and mold it to your belief if you have to. Yeah. So I feel bad, but I'm kind of on the fence with this one, because I do believe that there's other stuff out there. I do believe from what we've heard that she's quite a credible person, as is Dr. Schwarz, but it seems to me that there's a lot of stories and anecdotes as opposed to concrete fact in this one. Yeah. And she could be, I mean, you have to kind of explore the fact that maybe she was just, you know, really bored. Maybe she could have been suffering from paranoid schizophrenia. And yeah, maybe. And this is why I think something, as you said, could be, you know, military aircraft that. Exactly. And I think that's why we need to tread carefully, because of the words that have been associated with her. I personally don't like the sort of gang mentality. I've never been one to settle for that, the gang mentality of like kind of surrounding someone and saying they're a fraud or whatever. I think like you don't have, because like sometimes that, as I've seen so many effects of that in people's lives and etc. and in their mental health, and in this here, it's not like we're talking about William Mumler that obviously took a lot of monetary advantage, financial gains from his activities. She didn't. Yeah. And this is why I'm like, I think this is why we need to tread carefully, whether we believe in her or not. I want to believe. But I think it's one of those cases where I really would love to have seen the negatives, and I'd love to have seen everything. Yeah. And another of those cases that is an interesting corner in the photography world, I Absolutely. Suppose. I mean, there's some other bits, but there is, you know, more recent examples if anyone is interested. David Eckhart, a Florida native, started experiencing aliens from the 1980s. He was abducted, so he says. And in 2006, he managed to capture what appears to be an alien enter his room on a security camera. Look at that. I'd be interested to know what people think. And even, you know, Barack Obama was interviewed recently after he was president, saying that when he became president, he asked if there was alien proof, if there were aliens kept in some lab, but there wasn't. So he says, which I find kind of interesting that he would say that, but a lot of kind of footage and unexplained images. And then just lastly, which I think we should link as well, because this is quite interesting if you're into what Stella's work was. John Olsenleer, who was an aviator who set multiple records. He flew cargo planes for the CIA during Vietnam. In the 1980s, he started speaking about aliens and a secret collusion with governmental forces. And he said he became the most influential source of UFO conspiracy theories. But he believed that they weren't our friends, and that films like E.T. and Close Encounters were created to kind of prepare us to receive information about these encounters that we were going to experience. Like, this lad perfectly believed that these little grey men or green men were walking amongst us. Talking about walking amongst us, the next episode is going to be a very interesting one, because it's something that we've uncovered during the research of this episode, and it's going to be talking about let's say certain individuals that walked among us. Yeah. Shall we put it this way? Yeah, I think that's kind of you're not giving too much away. Yeah, not giving too much, but kind of enticing the audience. Yeah. So yeah, looking forward to hearing what you guys think. And yeah, some suggestions for what you'd like us to dive into next would be lovely. Yeah, exactly. So we'll leave it up to you now to, you know, maybe if you're interested, do some research, because we'll be leaving now. We'll be saying our goodbyes. So for me, as I usually say in my videos, I hope you keep safe, keep shooting, keep creating, keep learning, even about the weirdest facts and corners in photography. Keep it weird. Slán. Peace.
Mm-hmm.